This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Graham Show. Once again, I am your host, Tim Flattery, and today on the podcast, we are continuing our theme of quarantine-themed episodes because the big question right now is, how are you handling quarantine? And what that really means is, are the kids driving you crazy? What restaurants are you getting takeout food from? And ultimately, what shows are you watching? And one of the shows that we've been watching here in the Flattery household, by the recommendation of my good buddy Michael Sandvig, he called me a couple weeks ago and he says, you got to watch this show, Alone. And so Alone, which is on Amazon Prime, that's where I watched it, but it was originally, I believe, on the History Channel. And so Alone is, they send 10 kind of survivalist type people out into the wilderness all by themselves. And they send 10 people out there, but these 10 people are not together. So each of these 10 people are all by themselves, but in the same general vicinity out in nature. And the whole point of the game is whoever can last the longest out in the wild, out in the wilderness, without going crazy or getting eaten by a bear or getting eaten by a mountain lion or dying of dysentery, they win $500,000. Pretty cool concept for a show. I'm generally into things like this. And so I started watching this first season of Alone on Amazon Prime, and within 2 episodes, I was totally hooked because these guys are actually filming themselves the entire time they're out there. There is no film crew. They have to film their story. They have to film themselves getting firewood and building a camp and building a cottage and building a fire and getting food and all this stuff. And it just becomes really good, fascinating TV because there's some really great characters on the show. And so I really got hooked into this season 1 of Alone. I quickly ran through season 1 and season 2. But how this ties into our episode today is in season 1 of the show Alone, there happened to be a guy named Lucas Miller from Quasqueton, Iowa, a town that I previously had never heard of before. And he was one of the best characters from season 1 of the show Alone. So while I'm watching the show, I thought, man, it'd be really fun to get this guy on the podcast. While everybody is binge watching shows right now, this could be a podcast that we could do that people could hear this interview. They could go binge watch his season. It'd be a really good tie-in while everybody is locked up in quarantine right now. And we're all kind of alone in our own regard. We're all kind of alone, locked up in our houses right now. So we thought it might be a fun tie-in for the Moonlight Graham Show, especially since, survivalists are kind of like athletes. This is a mental toughness game. Who can keep their minds occupied, who can be the most mentally tough, who can survive. There's a lot of crossover between sports and the show Alone, I really thought. And so I think you guys are really going to love this episode with Lucas Miller from the show Alone. And I will preface this episode real quick saying that Lucas is not living in Iowa right now. He's actually living in Arizona. He's like homesteading down in southern Arizona along the border. And the first 10 minutes of the episode, there's a couple of points where his connection gets a little jumbly. It clears up really quick. And for the large majority of the episode, the connection is really great. And he gives a fantastic interview. It was really fun to get him on the podcast. And you guys can actually hear like these little baby chickens in the background that he's got in his house right now throughout the episode, which is really funny. I thought it added a nice little touch because this guy's a total outdoorsman. He's a total Iowan, and he's a fun guy to watch on the show Alone. If you're looking for something to binge watch, head out over to Amazon Prime and check this show out. And as always, folks, if you like what we're doing here on the Moonlight Graham Show, make sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to the Moonlight Graham Show and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow the show on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can even listen to the episodes on YouTube. Subscribe to the Moonlight Graham Show. We love hearing from you guys each and every week. So enjoy today's episode with Moonlighter Lucas Miller. This week's episode of the Moonlight Graham Show is brought to you by The People's Company. That's right, they are back as a sponsor because so often I hear from farmers throughout Iowa and throughout the Midwest who are listening to the podcast while they are planting, while they are harvesting. They're in their tractors, they're in their combines, which makes the People's Company a perfect partner for the Moonlight Graham Show here. As you guys probably well know, the People's Company is based in West Des Moines, Iowa, but they've really grown to be one of the nation's leading providers in land brokerage, land management, land appraisal, and investment services. These guys, and I know Andrew Zelmer and Matt Adams over there at the People's Company, these guys live and breathe farmland, farm management, and they know that industry better than anybody. So if you're looking to buy a farm, sell a farm, having an auction coming up, call the People's Company. They are the best in the business. Check them out at peoplescompany.com. I'm watching the Alone show this week because my best buddy calls me up and he goes, "You got to watch this show, Alone. It's on Amazon Prime right now." I start watching it. I see in the first episode Lucas Miller from Quasqueton, Iowa, and I'm like, I got to get this guy on the show. And you turned out to be like my favorite character from the show anyway, and I just loved it. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, well, thanks for being a fan. It was something I didn't expect that I would do, and you know, when they originally first contacted me, this casting company, they called me. I wasn't really searching for them. They said, "Hey, do you want to do the show, or we drop you off alone in Montana in the winter?" And I said, "Well, what? What? Montana? I don't know if you've ever been to Montana, but it's pretty cold, and there's about 5 foot of snow on the ground. I'd rather not, thanks." And they said, "Well, would you do it if it was somewhere else?" And I said, "Yeah, maybe in the Pacific Northwest, because there might be, there's always fishing, but there might be salmon runs still going." And they're like, "Okay, we'll give you a call back." And so they called me back 2 weeks later, and they said, "All right, nobody wants to do it in Montana. Good suggestion. We're looking at the Pacific Northwest now. Are you interested?" And I said, "Yeah, possibly." And so we started a conversation that way.
Well, how did a casting company just find you? Like, were you on somebody's list for survival shows or something?
No, actually, that's what's interesting is that everybody else on the show had sought them, and they sought me because I work for this nonprofit in Arizona called Anasazi Foundation. And what we do is take troubled youth into the mountains and the wilderness in Arizona for about 70 days at a time. So kids that are right on this edge, they're not self-harmers exactly, but they're kind of kids who've been maybe caught into stealing or drugs or just kind of stepping into some rough lifestyle choices that aren't going to work long-term, right? So we really connect them with nature. We try not to overteach them anything. So for example, if some teenage kid comes in with an attitude, we don't try to tell them what to do. We'll let them fail and sleep. If they don't know how to set up a tarp, for example, and it rains, we don't help them until they learn how to ask for help. So are you a parent, Tim?
I'm not, no.
Yeah. Well, I'm not either yet. I hope someday if that works out. But anyways, a lot of parents will try to always come at their kids and teach them, "Hey, you need to do this, and hey, you need to do that." The whole program is very different. We're going to love these kids. We're going to watch them fall until they realize, "Oh man, I need help," right? Like I'm not doing this very well. I need to learn how to tie my shoes. I need to know how to pack my pack. I need to know how to start a fire. We don't even let them get matches or lighters. They have to start a fire with a bow drill, friction fire set, and they don't learn until they ask, and they either ask their peers or us. And so once they start making and asking and really and improving their situation, that's when we step in. Aha, yeah, we'll show you guys for sure. So I've been doing that for a while, and then they called my boss, and they said, "Hey, do you have anybody who'd be good for the show?" And they said, "Yeah, we know a wild guy who might fit in." And so I got a call out of the blue from some unknown number. "And do you want to be on a TV show?" I'm like, "I don't know. Are you legit? Right. Are you for real?" And then I kind of told them no 2 or 3 times, but then I was checking into my own kind of personal inner compass, the one that we kind of check into if we make a big purchasing decision or a move or a job change or a relationship. And I was like, you know what, even though this feels uncomfortable, it does feel right. And I started to get a lot of feelings that this could be good for me and maybe a larger audience. So I said yes. Eventually, after a long story, I did say yes, and we started dancing together. And that's a whole different thing. Not a lot of people see what is it like to work for a TV company and how to navigate that well, and so that you don't get screwed, and how to really build a good relationship with people behind the scenes. So that's a whole other part of the show that you'll never see. But anyways, yeah.
Well, tell me about that part of the show, because that's one of the things I'm interested in, because this show alone, you know, it strands 10 people out in the Pacific Northwest. Your season was Vancouver Island, and you guys are filming yourself. So there's not a camera crew on site, but there's a couple shots throughout your season where I'm wondering, is there someone else filming that? Because it shows you coming and going. And so did you have a connection with the crew or the show that we don't see on TV?
As a whole, no. So that whole thing about it being self-filmed is really legit. However, they will do what's called B-roll footage. And so they drop us off. We're really alone for 7-8 days at a time. As a whole, we really are alone. Like, that part isn't necessarily false. However, there was one day where they did shoot a shot for me because they needed to be on site, because I was doing something that nobody had done and they didn't think anybody was really going to do. So there was
and what was
a
that
day
exactly?
That was the canoe shot. So there's a shot of the canoe so I was about to go in the water, and they're like, so we have this device. It's like a GPS device that has texting capabilities. So if I got hurt, I could press the red button and they'd come and get me. But it also had texting capabilities because we needed to have some communication with them, basically like, hey, my camera broke. You know, because if we're out there for 8 days and we don't have a camera, then we're not able to relay our experience to the TV company and thus the world. So we had to have some contact. It was never like a cell phone situation. But basically, no, I was totally alone. But when I told them, hey, I built a canoe, I'm going to set sail. And they're like, hold up, we need to just be out there for safety purposes. And there was a guy, I think, who got a shot of me, and they put it in for a moment, and it's across the bay shot. Other than that, everything else is self-filmed. There's B-roll footage, which is like water dripping off of moss and like trees and sunlight. A lot of that stuff I actually filmed myself too, but they did do some of that. But otherwise, everything else is self-filmed. Tim, I actually filmed everything, and it takes a lot of work to set that up. You're not just now doing survival stuff. You're having to come and go, carrying your pot of water, or setting up your canoe, or fishing. It's all, I have to think of the angles and how can I tell the story, because shots tell a story. And so if I just film myself fishing, for example, it doesn't tell the story of like, I'm hungry, I need to get food. And then like, what can I do to catch food? Do I want to make a fishing pole? Okay, I make a fishing pole. Actually, that doesn't work. I'm going to try fishing traps. Okay, I'm building fishing traps. So then you come along on a journey with me where I'm trying to problem solve, as opposed to just filming me fishing, which is kind of like static. It's kind of bland. So we're taught to really tell our stories and to include our failures and to include the entirety of our situation. And that part was one of the most rewarding experiences for me being out there, besides the kind of awakenings that happen when you're in deep isolation or when you're in deep reflection time, when you're alone, you know. So that's another.
That storytelling piece is really interesting because, you know, part of the show is that you're completely alone, but then the other side of it is you guys are talking into a blank camera the whole time. And I think like being alone probably would mess with you, but you also see like so many of the people on the show also talk about how just bizarre it is to be, you know, talking to a camera the whole time and nobody's talking back. Did that mess with you mentally a little bit?
No, never me. Well, let me back up a little bit. I should say that the vulnerability part was hard, Tim, like at first, because, okay, so imagine, like, I don't know who you are. We're just meeting each other. But like, what if someone sees the inside of your life, like all your dirty laundry, how you connect with your wife or your friends, or, you know, like all the way that we don't present ourselves to the world with the world mask, you know, like we go out and we do our jobs and, hey, how you doing, buddy? You know, we slap people on the shoulders, but not many people see the inner struggles. And I think that's what makes this show really interesting and valuable. Like I think it's the show just, even, I know I'm on it, but has a piece for just humanity. I think it's really valuable because you see human beings. It's not acted. It's not scripted. Nobody asked us to say a single word. And you're seeing people celebrate their victories and suffer and anything in between, right? Like how much of an insight do we have on people's life like that? And if we do, it's in movies and that's acted, right? So here is like a really original show that's showing the inner workings of people's minds, hearts, and bodies. And just for that, it's brilliant. Like some of my favorite shots are the first episodes. You see people really going through massive amounts of fear. When it first came out, people were like, "This isn't real. This stuff's scripted. These guys are all actors." And all 10 of us stood up when social media was like, people were saying this. We're like, "No, buddy. Sorry, I was really out there, and like, there's nothing really artificial about this." And as seasons went on, the community who watched the show was kind of like, "Oh yeah, this is pretty legit for the most part." Like this is one of the few shows out there that's really sharing a real experience. And that's why I'm proud to talk about it and be on it, because I'm a private person. I'm also a person who isn't striving to be famous and on TV. So anyways, I think it has a lot of value.
Yeah, I love that first couple of episodes when the predators were such a main character in the show, because first of all, you saw some predators right away, which was really cool. At first, when I turned it on, I thought, they're going to hype up the bears and the wolves and the cougars, but you're never going to see them because they're going to try to protect these people from the predators. But then right away in the first couple of episodes, you see how scared these guys are. And these aren't, put together situations. These aren't fake situations. These are real emotions. It's real danger. It's real fear. And that's what got me hooked on the show, is seeing this guy crying 4 hours after getting dropped off.
Yeah, right. So we knew what was coming our way, but the gravity and the actuality of being dropped in a place like that struck most people down pretty quick. I thought that was interesting. Just how confident people can be and not always grounded in the reality of what a situation is going to be. And so that, to me, that kind of shocked me, to be honest. Like when I first watched the show, I was like, really? Oh man, that's interesting.
Yeah. So let's talk about the basics of the show. Like, I know they let you bring about 10 items onto the show with you. So people bring hatchets and saws and knives and tarps and things like that. What items did you bring?
Oh, shoot. So yeah, we had a list of 40 items that we could pick 10 from. And so most of us picked similar items, but not all of us. Some of the items on the list that I chose were things like a 2-quart or a 1-quart cook pot, a knife, an axe, and a saw are items that I chose that not everybody else chose. I was really interested in wood production and creating firewood and crafting and building, so I chose those items. I chose a tarp, and it just didn't specify what kind of tarp. So I went and thought about those truckers tarps that I see shooting out of Cedar Rapids. I grew up near Cedar Rapids, like really heavy duty vinyl tarps. So I got one of those, which is ultimately what I ended up making a canoe out of as a skin around the frame. So another thing I chose was a sleeping bag. That's pretty clear that most people choose that. A fire striker. So I did a ferro rod. It's kind of a flint and steel thing, which you see on the show, throws off sparks. And there were some options to choose food items, like 5 pounds of lentils or 2 pounds of lentils or something like that, or 2 pounds of flour. And so I wanted to have some of those food items because I knew until I get my house built, until I get my bearing on the land, I'm going to need sustenance, because you can't be fishing and building a house at the same time. And you don't even know where the good fishing spots are. So I knew I needed a little bit of time to kind of get my bearings. Yeah.
Did you bring any items that you did not end up using?
No, but I think in hindsight, I would have switched out the axe for the gill net. Some people chose a gill net, and I grew up on the Wapsipican River in northeastern Iowa, and I just didn't even know what a gill net was. And I didn't really research enough to understand how it works, but you see people using it on the show, and they were very successful with it. They were able to set it up in the waves, and the waves just pushed fish right into the nets, and then they would get caught in the gill net, and so they were able to just have passive food production. You always want to think like that. If you're a survivalist, most Midwesterners are going to think, cool, I'm going to get my bow and arrow and go shoot the deer. I'm going to get my gun and shoot the deer. And actually, that's like very inefficient. What you want is to set up trap lines. You want to set up things that are working for you while you're resting or building your house or doing other things. So any way that you can bring in a lot of food with doing a little amount of work and not have to be there in person is a great thing. Trap lines and finding slow moving protein. So instead of going after a big fast deer, think about things that move slower and that are more bite sized or meal sized. Things like mussels and snails and clams out there are slow moving proteins. So that's the sort of thing that you want to begin to consider. And then if you got a bunch of that stuff stocked up, then it's okay to go after the deer. But a lot of those guys who are on the show, I think were Midwesterners or people who are used to deer hunting and just thought, yeah, I'm going to go get the deer. I'm going to go get the bear. And that's a lot of work. And it's not really wise to do off the bat.
What was the worst thing you ate on the show?
Let's see. What was the worst thing I ate? Actually, I ate some mussels, and I ate them at night, and some of them were rotten. And it leads me to a situation where my dad would call it the green apple quick step. So I was running out of my tent at night, pretty sick to my stomach, and it dehydrated me because I was coming out of both ends, and it was just wrong. I just ate basically a rotten mussel because I was just by my campfire and I couldn't tell, and I was just eating goopy stuff. And by the time it was down the hatch, I was like, that was not a good one.
I remember that episode of the show, and I'm thinking, I can't imagine anything worse than having like diarrhea out in, when you're alone by yourself. And the initial question everybody asks is like, how do you wipe? Like, how do you wipe your butt out in the wilderness?
I'm a world traveler, and at first that thing really kind of boggled me and kind of grossed me out. It's kind of like the first time that I cleaned a deer, like you're touching flesh and bones and blood, and I'm kind of ginger with it because I was like, ooh, I'm kind of queasy with it. After a while, you learn to develop a sort of comfort with these things. And so while I was there, I was using sphagnum moss and different types of mosses because they're already kind of damp. So they have that like spongy, wet, clean sort of thing. So I was using a bunch of like moss out there. But when I'm on the trail with the kids, there's not in the desert, we don't have that stuff. And so some people use sticks, literally sticks, rocks. And then there's a bunch of pokey trees like juniper, which is really not that great to wipe with. And in India and most places in the world, they use their left hand with water. So no toilet paper, no nothing. You splash your hand with water, you reach around, you clean up, and I don't know, it's getting to the nails, I'm like, this is pretty gritty, graphic, but it's just washing with water. And I had a conversation with a guy about it before I ever tried it. And he was from Pakistan, and he was a dude who moved into Decorah, Iowa, and he was having a conversation with me, and he goes, "You guys are gross." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You," he was a buddy of mine. He's giving us a hard time. He goes, "You Americans, he's like, you guys are all gross. Like most of the world uses water to clean up after they go to the bathroom." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Toilet paper is great. Like you don't have to touch it. Like it's all good to go." And he goes, "Imagine if I took a piece of dog shit, and like rub it against your arm and you just have a smear of dog poop on your arm. Like, would you rather have water to clean that off or would you rather have dry toilet paper to wipe it off?" And I kind of thought about it. I'm like, I guess you're kind of right. I would choose water over that. And he goes, "Yeah, consider how that is on your backside." So I was like, I tried it once I traveled to India a few times, and it's really not that bad, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah, it's definitely not for me. I'll tell you that. And yeah. Lucas, when I'm watching the show, I really loved it because my biggest fear in life, and I've told this to all my friends, is like getting attacked by a mountain lion is, I think, the worst possible way to go. So every time I'm out like in Colorado or somewhere like that, I'm actually just terrified of mountain lions. And so the show related to me because I see how terrified these other guys are, and the predators are real. I mean, they show that graphic 100 times about thousands of bears and mountain lions and wolves and all this stuff, and you can hear them at night. How scared were you of all the predators?
So in my show, there's a lot of people who wrote me and they said, well, you're lucky that you didn't have bears around. You're lucky you didn't have wolves and mountain lions around. And I said, well, you guys just didn't see everything. And the people who did exit, they had strong experiences. But I talked with Alan. He's a buddy of mine who won the show, and a few other people. We all had experiences with things that were after us. I had bears huff and pop around my camp within, 30, 40 feet of me.
Wow.
I had a pack of wolves circle my yurt that I had built one night, and they just sounded off, and they knew I was there, and they knew I had fish and game like in the area, and they were hungry or they were exploring. I don't actually know. So I did feel pretty spooked, to be honest, at first. The mountain lions were the creepiest ones. There was only once that I walked down a trail and like my spidey sense started going off, like, do not go forward. Something's not right. And I just felt like there was mountain lion energy around, and I can't confirm that. That's just something that I felt, and I trust that instinct, and I turned around and left. Out of all the things out of there, I'd rather dance with a bear. I'd rather dance with a wolf than a mountain lion. I've had some cats growing up, and even an angry farm cat that weighs 5 to 10 pounds will just eviscerate. It can just tear apart your arm or mess you up, and a mountain lion, if it latches on right, I mean, its hind claws are going to just disembowel you, like its crush factor is just going to just wreck you, and all you can do is hope to, really, I had a kid, I had some kids on the trail ask me this question: how would you fight a cougar? And I said, well, I'd honestly, like, if I had a jacket, I'd wrap up my arm, and if it's coming at me, I'd probably let it bite my arm while I can choke out or wreck it while it's trying to maneuver it so it doesn't eviscerate me, because it's those hind legs, if you pick it off the ground, are just going to go thwack, 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 and it's going to be a bad day for your front side. So yeah, so to answer your question more directly, Tim, I was concerned about it more and more, and then it drove me into a space of exhaustion, kind of being hyper aware. And I came to this point where I'm like, hey man, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And I'm going to be smart out here, but I'm no longer interested in like waking up over every little crack of the branch. If this thing wants to come in here, I got my blade ready. That's all I can do. I chose to be here. I'm just going to have a little faith in creator energy and just like trust that if it's going to go down this way, that's a cool story too. My parents will be a little bummed, but they'd also be a little proud, I think, too, that like, yeah, Lucas went down fighting a cougar or a bear, tooth and nail. Because you do have to eventually just trust that we're all going to eat it someday. We're all going to go, and I'm not trying to be stupid about it, but at the end of the day, I just have to trust that, like, hey, I can't lose sleep and have like just a terrible experience out here if I'm always stressed. And so there was a moment where that broke for me, and all of a sudden I just started living better. I just trusted more. I'm like, cool, if it's going to happen like that, it's going to happen like that.
Yeah, and you could really see that in the show with yourself and Alan and Sam and Mitch, the final 4 guys. You guys had hit a point where you all had kind of figured out the game a little bit, where you had water, you had, some food, you had pretty good shelters, and the show really transitioned to, we're afraid of the predators, to like more of a mental struggle. How long do I have to stay out here? How long can I stand being alone? And you were at a point where, you built this yurt, this really awesome shelter with like a fireplace in it. You had a canoe. You made yourself a stringed instrument, and you really looked like, man, this guy, it looks like he could just be living out here right now.
Yeah. Yep. And then not too long after, I stopped.
Yeah.
So that's the big question that people ask me the most, is like, what's up, bro? You were crushing it. Were you not? And I said, yes, I pretty much was. I got to that point where most of my life was set up. I had access to clams. They didn't show that much, but I did. Once I had the canoe made, I was able to go over and get infinite amount of clams. I had created a live well back at my camp, dug into the earth, where I was keeping clams alive, so I didn't have to go over there but every 5 days or a week to eat clams. I was catching fish to supplement the diet. I was still eating seaweeds and nettles and things like that. So I was kind of good to go. And then something shifted in me where I had to ask myself how long I wanted to be out there and just do this. And I think there's something in me that this was less, it's hard to explain to people, but this was less of I would have loved to have walked away with $500,000. Absolutely. Who doesn't want that sort of boon or gift in their life? Money is like, that sort of money is life-changing money. It's buying a property or whatever, buying a house. But I'm also a person that has sworn to live my life according to like this inner compass and this inner guide, despite what money is offered to me. And that's not for everybody, but like, imagine, Tim, that you were offered a great job, but you felt not good doing it. Like, how long are you going to last doing that? Like, you're a person you're making your own way right now, Tim. You're doing a show about things you love, right? Like things you love, especially Iowa sports. So it's like, you're making your dreams come true and you're living your best life. And it's still not easy or perfect all the time, but you're doing stuff that you love. And I loved being out there to a certain point. And then I started to feel like this is no longer right for me. And I don't know how else to explain it, but I spent 3 days kind of feeling it out. I walked around with my instrument. I kind of meditated. I kind of just took some time to really reflect and be like, is this just a hard point? Like, am I just at a hard point and need to like shift gears and like stay out here longer? Or am I just pushing my body to try to get this money? And what sort of message does that tell the world, Tim? Like, hi, I'm Lucas and I'm going to do anything it takes to win. And that's not actually who I am. Like, hi, I'm Lucas. I'm going to do anything that it takes to succeed as long as it's right for me. And that's all I can really say. And I know that some people are a little let down by that because they're like, dude, you could have crushed it. And it's like, yeah, but what's the goal? Like, to make money or to live well? And I don't regret it. I really don't. Like, I had a great time out there, and then the conversation just felt like it was time for me to be done.
How often when you were out there, Lucas, were you thinking about the other competitors and like the competition as opposed to just the survival? Like, did you know you were in fourth place? Did you know there were 3 other guys out there, or do they not tell you any of that at all?
They didn't tell us anything, really. But the producer came out somewhere around day 30, and he was rubbing his forehead. And he's a friend of mine. I've actually went and worked on another TV show with him for ABC called Castaways. I was a producer for it. This whole Alone show actually led to another job for me, which was amazing. We were in Papua New Guinea. But anyways, my friend Grant, or the then producer, was rubbing his forehead, and he's like, this is tough, but like, would you stay out here if you knew your number? Like, if you knew what number you were? And I was like, I don't know. I don't really know if that would affect me. And he had a hard time, but he was considering telling people what place, or I'm sorry, not what place, but like how many people were left. Because he didn't, I think we all thought that there was more people left. We were never told that 6 people dropped in 6 days. So in my mind, there's a bunch of other guys out there still. And at that moment, he said, I'm going to choose to tell you that you're one of 4 people because we want you to have a concept of where you're at. And we're not going to tell you any more information past this, but we're telling this information to everybody. So it's fair. It's like a fair, because the game show rules, they have to be really strict about fairness and all that. Like, they can't tell one person something and the other person another thing. So he did tell me I was one of 4 left, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, well, what happened? He's like, I can't tell you that. You're just going to have to watch the show. So I found out with you guys what really went down. But I knew I was one of 4, and then I lasted another like 2 weeks or so after that, or somewhere around there, I forget, like a week or 2. And so it's hard to know. Like, I did think about other people to also answer your question, but not as a competition state. It was more like when we would get rocked by a heavy storm, I was like, dang, like my boys are out here, and you really, I don't know how else to explain it, but when you're starving and you're alone, your heart, I know it sounds sappy and we're on like a dude show probably, but your heart really opens up to care about other people a lot more. At least mine did. And I talked to Alan. He said, absolutely. He goes, when that storm hit, I was more concerned about you guys more than I was hoping that it knocked one of you out. He goes, that thought never entered my mind. And I'm like, me neither. Like, as a whole, I mean, I did want to win, but it was like, man, are these guys okay? I hope they got in time, and like, I hope they're, nobody's hurt. So it was really more of a general concern and care for the people that I went through this process with,
Yeah, for sure. And I think that came out, like, you came across as a real kind of compassionate character, even though you were there alone, which I thought was really interesting. But you had a quote during the show that I wrote down while I was watching it because I thought it was so cool. You said, "This would be so much better with a friend." And I think you said that kind of at a low time, but I thought it was a perfect example of, like, you know, there's more than just nature that we're fighting against here. And, you know, maybe you're still out there if you're doing it with a buddy.
Oh, totally. Like, you know, give me a 22 and a sack of potatoes and a buddy, you know, like, or my girlfriend who's also like totally amazing at this stuff. Like I would have, it would be a whole different experience because we're really, you know, anytime that throughout humankind, the only stories of people really going off alone were people who needed to talk to God or nature, or to find something deep within themselves that they haven't found yet. So young men's or young women's rites of passage, where they do vision quests, you know, or alone things to find themselves and to find who they are. But as a whole, man, we're people, you know, we need our communities, we need our partners, we need our family and friends. And the ache that comes up after an extended amount of period in isolation is really undeniable and unbelievable. It's really hard to describe. Like, it's really hard to describe the ache that we feel. And a lot of us are like, man, I'd love to be alone for a little bit. Yeah, it's good to get away from the wife and the kids for a little while, but like 20 days, 30 days, 40 days, I guarantee most people are going to be blubbering messes. And they're going to be like, man, get me back home to that cheeseburger and that couch and my family and friends and a grill out. You know, like we're definitely a group sort of animal.
So you mentioned earlier the big storm, and it rained most of your season on that show. But there was a point there where it rained for like 4 days in a row, and nobody left their tents. Nobody left their camp. What were you doing to pass the time for 96 hours straight when it's raining?
Yeah, I always had a fire going, so I felt really comfortable in my shelter. And even though it rained those days, I'm just not afraid to get out in it. And so I was actually out. So sometimes they tell the story on television a certain way because it's mostly true, right? Like they're trying to tell a bigger picture story. For the most part, I was in my shelter and I was building things like, I think that might've been the time I was building my guitar, my little guitar thing, or working on traps or working on XYZ. But man, I was also out there, you know, like I come from like Scotch, Irish, English descent. And it's just like, you live, like, I don't mind coming down, you know, being outside in the rain and the snow. Like if you're from Iowa, we got the weather, you know, like
right.
There's snow and rain, and you just kind of, if you're a farm kid or you're a rural kid, like that's just a part of life. You just get out in it. And so as long as you're dressed good, you know, you can go out there and do chores. So I just kind of thought of it like that. Just like, hey, I'm just doing chores. So to answer your question, I was out in it, and I also spent a lot of time crafting, and that was hard I could see on Alan, for example, it kind of spun him out, like, or maybe not spun him out, but you could see him going into his mind and going crazy.
He was a one man show for a while.
He's so good. Like Alan's amazing. I just talked to him yesterday. We had a great phone call that lasted about a half hour. And he's in Tennessee, and he's homesteading, and he's loving life. And, but yeah, he's so entertaining. Like watching him was probably one of my favorite parts of the show. Like, and that first episode, just Alan like reciting his poetry and being goofy and seeing the insides of the inner workings of how people pass time. And you could tell it was hard for him. And at the same time, he had a good sense of humor.
Yeah, what was it like to go back and rewatch the show, to see the other contestants, but then also to see how your story was being told? Because I'm sure there's one way that you think your story is going by how you're filming it, and it's another thing when the producers cut it up.
Yeah. I actually, it was a little uncomfortable for me, to be honest, at first, but I'm also just uncomfortable with like praise and scrutiny. I'm actually more comfortable probably with constructive criticism than I am praise. I think most people are, you know, it's like somebody can tell you did a great job 99 times, but somebody telling you, you know, like something hard. Like, I don't know. What I'm trying to get at is like, it's weird watching yourself move through a process and seeing your patterns and behaviors and like emotional responses. It's a little uncomfortable, but I thought there was a lot of growth for me in it too. Like, I don't know how else to explain it, but I felt like it was beneficial for me just to see myself and really like witness a bigger story that was playing out and see all the arcs, like the highs and the lows. I think they did a good job cutting up my story. I also think they chose to share every emotional thing that I ever did, and they and they maybe didn't share like things like all the fish I caught or all the XYZ that happened. But their job is to constantly put you on an arc. So you're on a roller coaster because you as a viewer are going to be much more interested on somebody who's either about to succeed or about to fail. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes interesting TV. And so in that sense, they definitely distilled my more emotional highs and lows. But where there was a lot more in between stuff too, just like moderate, like just chilling and being grateful to be there and having a fine sunny day, catching a fish, normal stuff.
Did you get paid at all for being on the show?
Yeah, I did. So they pay you weekly for how long you're out there, and it would be no more than just an average paying gig, So as being a construction worker, I would have made, I'm not a construction worker, but I made like the same, just doing like basic work.
Sure.
So it wasn't like I walked home with like a fat paycheck that changed my life. It was like, oh, okay, I did this thing where, I made a little over $1,000 a week, and also it threw me off for the next 6 months because my body is shifted. Like coming home was so weird, like you're used to listening to nature and now you're in this world of honk honk beep beep and your phone and social media, and it's just like, it was crushing. It wrecked most of us who came back from long-term situations. And today it's still a conversation that we have with other alone participants to help them reintegrate. It's just like, I guess, I don't know how else to describe it, but it's like people who've gone off to war and come back. Like nobody knows what they went through except for the guys who are out there with them, or the men or women who are out there with them.
Yeah, I know a lot of people like in the Peace Corps that are off in, very remote areas of the world. They have a lot of trouble coming back. And even though, it's not the Peace Corps, I'm sure it's a similar re-indoctrination back to Americanism.
Yep, totally. And I think it really comes down to the fact that I see it with the kids that I take out on the trail on this program, this wilderness therapy program, that we actually do better with simple lives that are closer to nature. And I'm not fully I'm not trying to say that we should all go back and live, like cavemen or cavewomen, but there is something really healing about making our lives more simple and not surrounding ourselves with as much stuff. And I personally feel way more focused, way more happy, and when I'm in communities of people and nature. And gosh, some of my best moments in life are taking these kids out on the trail where life is simple. We're just cooking foods together at a campfire and popping around, finding our own medicines, and building bows and arrows, and just doing all this cool stuff. And then you come back to society and everybody's posturing and trying to look that, it's a lot of, it's a lot of confusion, I think, sometimes living in this modern culture.
What was your first indulgence that you sunk into after the show? Like when you get off, you're like, I just want a cheeseburger, or I want this.
Yeah, I really wanted a chocolate chip oatmeal cookie with a big glass of milk. I don't know why. It's just like that slow burning, like some oats and some chocolate and some carb. And so they had this thing set up where they said, all right, we're going to make sure you get that on the boat when we pick you up. We're going to have that. So I was so excited, like literally dreaming about this for like days and days, that I'm going to get picked up with tall glass of milk and like chocolate chip cookie, or maybe a pie. I think I asked for that too, pumpkin pie. And I get on the boat and they do a lot of filming for me because they need to make sure they're closing the story up. And so once all the final shots and all the filming is done, I'm like, walking down into this boat, like, all right, where's my stuff? And there's this bag that's open, and I could tell there's all these helpers and people who are like film crew, and they demolished everything. There wasn't like a few crumbs, and I about went into a frenzy. I was like, "You guys are you serious? Is this a joke? You literally picked up cookies for me and milk and drank them on the way out." And they're like, "Oh, bro, sorry. We thought." And they all just looked around at each other like, "Who ate the last one? That's messed up." So, anyways, they took me to a grocery store afterwards, and I got my cookies and whatnot. But yeah, you just crave certain foods because your body's not getting enough of a certain mineral or starch or something.
Right. What do you think, Lucas, changed your life more? The fact, like, the 45 days or whatever it was that you spent out there by yourself alone, or the fact that you were on a TV show?
It's a good question. I've never been asked that. People really remember the show, and they'll talk to me about it a lot. So it changed my relationship. So to answer your question, I think they both did in different ways. And I know that's a diplomatic answer, but it is true. People treat me different because before, like even my own family, like they didn't quite understand. Like I left Iowa at a certain age to see the West, and I started to become a guide and taught people and started getting deeper into primitive skills and traditional ways and backpacking, and just got deeper and deeper and harder into it. But I don't think my family really understood that. They kind of thought I was an interesting weirdo. You know what I mean? I think, like, what are you doing, man? Like, you're just out running around the world, get a normal job, like have a family, settle down. But I was just following what felt right to me. And so I was their free-spirited brother or son. And, but when they saw the show, they were like, "Oh, whoa, like, dude, you know something. Like, oh, whoa, like you actually know how to make something happen out of nothing." I'm like, "Yeah, this is what I've been doing." And this was just like a short time out there. So it changed my relationship to people around me, because I think they definitely saw that I had some skill set, and they respected that. And that was really cool to gain that respect, because they couldn't see what I was up to. The personal aspect, the 40 days out on the show, definitely cracked open my heart, and definitely instilled in me a greater sense of compassion for people wherever they're at on their process. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, Tim. Have you ever had like you've lost somebody in your life, or gone into a car accident, or have like just a big, it almost breaks you sort of situation? Have you ever had anything like that happen?
Yeah, I have. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I don't know how else to describe it except as something like that, where all of a sudden you realize that BS is just BS and little things are just little things. And we stress over stuff that's absolutely ridiculous sometimes. And what really matters is, sorry, I got these chickens. You probably hear them. I got 11 little chickens on my homestead here. And
I was wondering what those were. They sound like birds.
Yeah, totally. They're little pullets. They're Rhode Island red, like layer hens, and they're just going nuts right now. They need fed. But anyways, such is life on my homestead. Yeah, and it just cracked me open to realize that there are bigger things going on in this world, and that I have been really self-centric, self-focused. And it really cracked me open to be like, whoa, there's people in this world that are starving right now and are not going to get food at the end of their experience. Like, there are people like I'm filming a show right now that people are watching, but it is not reality. This is not really my reality. I'm going to go back home to a car and a bed and a life and things. And there are people out here that are not going to get those things. And that really dawned on me, like, whoa, we are really, we really have an abundance. And there are people out there that are dying that are going to have to suffer a lot longer than I am. And it really shifted my perspective on a lot of things. So that changed for me personally that way.
Did you have any like weird women try to, sneak into your DMs on Facebook or Instagram or something like that? I'm sure there's like a lot of women that are like, I want an outdoorsy guy like that.
Yeah, I get that still, Tim. Yeah, so I've met some really sweet and kind people that have offered like amazing reflections to me, that write letters that they just drop in. They're just like, yo, I'm going through this thing in this moment in my life, and I watched your show and it just hit me.
And by the way, I'm in love with you.
Yeah, so I'll have that where like it's women and they're in love with me, and I'll have that just with like people who have like a deep admiration. So
Sure.
I have had some ladies definitely write and offer their admiration. So it's definitely it definitely is something you have to navigate well, and what's that look like, and yeah, so that has happened, Tim.
No, that's great. That makes my day. Well, Lucas, thank you so much for coming on the pod. I loved watching your season. I'm not just saying that because I was really happy that the guy that I liked from the show was also the guy that was from Iowa. I was prepared. I was like, this guy better not suck because, it's putting Quasqueton, Iowa up there on the screen every time they show him. So I hope he's good. And then you turned out to be like, the best guy on the show. So really great to get you on the podcast.
Yeah, for sure, Tim. And actually, there's a little side information since you're about Iowa sports. There's a man named Bing Miller who is my great uncle, and he never had children, but he's from Vinton, Iowa, and he's on one of the best baseball teams they say have ever existed. And it was with Connie Mack in the 1929 World Series, and he hit in the winning run at the last inning of the World Series. I'm sorry, the last inning, the last game of the World Series to win the game. And I just want to throw that out there just because you do sports and he's an Iowan and he's just kind of from my lineage. And if you haven't talked about him someday in your show, I hope you do, because he really did a lot for baseball in the 20s and the 30s. He actually took baseball over to Japan and helped spread it over to Japan with Babe Ruth and a few other guys. So another topic for another day.
Yeah, no, I just looked up Bing Miller's stats because I recognize his name. And about a year ago, we did a list of the top 100 athletes in Iowa history, and Bing Miller made our list.
Oh, cool.
And I'm looking at him right now. Bing Miller had almost 2,000 hits in his career, 116 home runs, career .311 hitter, played 16 years in the major leagues, all for the A's. Philadelphia and then Boston.
Yeah, he's actually really interesting. And that whole period around the Roaring 20s was just like a wild time. So he was in that whole period playing with Babe Ruth. Like, we got a baseball at home, signed the Bing and the Babe, both of them.
Wow.
Yeah, totally, like that sort of thing. And, just a quick story. They had the Goodyear blimp where they would do seventh inning stretches where they do exhibitions of like talent. Right. And so they asked him to come out in the seventh inning to catch balls dropped from the Goodyear blimp, which is like, 1,000 or 2,000 feet up in the air. So they dropped a ball and he ran around and caught it with one of those old fashioned gloves. And they dropped another ball. He was going to catch 3. He caught it too. And there's like zinging through the sky. And he misjudged the third one and it hit him on the shoulder and knocked him out cold in the field.
No way.
Yeah, they had to haul him off the field. I mean, he was fine, but he just got floored. But yeah, he has a couple World Series rings. So,
and he's your great uncle, huh?
Yep. So
that's cool. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Tim, thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure to talk about my experience, and I'm glad you represent Iowa. Even though I'm live in Arizona, I watch every Hawkeye game still. Like, it's just I can't help it. It's just a part of Iowa culture to follow the teams. I'm really glad Iowa State did so well this year in football. Yeah, I'm just proud of our state.
That's cool, man. Well, we were proud to see you on the show, and thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Take care, man.
Hey guys, thanks once again to listening to today's episode of the Moonlight Graham Show. And even though I do most of the interviews here on the podcast, there is a ton of work that happens behind the scenes that you guys don't see that make each episode possible. So I got to give a shout out to the Moonlight Graham Show team. First of all, Brian Sandvig, our producer. Brian does all of the post-production work, and in real life, he's not just a podcast producer, he's also a real estate agent. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home down in the Kansas or Missouri areas, give Brian Sandvig a call. Next guy on that list is Brendan Gargano. Brendan does all of our design and artwork here on the podcast. He's one of the most talented artists I've ever met, and I love all of his work. If you need any help on the design side with logos or anything like that, give Brendan Gargano a call. The next guy on that list is Andy Flattery, my older brother. Andy, of course, has done some of the interviews here on the podcast. He also is a certified financial planner. He owns a business called Simple Wealth Planning. If you need any help in that area, check Andy Flattery out. And then, of course, the trusty co-host Tom Griffin and my younger brother Neil Flattery. Those guys are just busy being husbands, being fathers, they're family men, but also they do a ton of work here on the show. So thanks again for listening. We really appreciate you guys subscribing and supporting the Moonlight Graham Show.